Right then, good evening, everybody. I do hope you can all hear me okay, and welcome to tonight's virtual fisheries forum, an introduction to safeguarding and welfare. So we can see we've just got a few more people joining the call now. Um, I appreciate there's probably quite a few people on this call who've been to virtual fisheries forums before, but I'm just going to give a bit of background and sort of housekeeping before we begin for the benefit of those that haven't been to one. So, for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Alex. I've been involved in organising meetings like this for the Angling Trust for getting on for 5 years now, both in person as our regional forums and obviously online as our virtual forums since COVID as well. Um, so depending on the device that you're logging on from tonight, you should all have a Q&A button somewhere on your screen. So I think if you're on a mobile device, it's usually at the top somewhere. And if you're joining from a laptop or desktop, it should be at the bottom. So if you've got any questions throughout the course of the meeting, all you need to do is click on that Q&A button, type them in. They will then come through to myself and the team, and we will be able to answer them for you in the Q&A segment of the meeting. I should add that we're due to finish for 8:30 p.m. In the unlikely eventuality that we don't get around to answering all your questions by 8:30, then we will make sure to follow those up in writing. So what we're going to do is we're going to produce a written Q&A document to accompany the recording from this meeting as well, which will circulate to everybody. So if there are any that we can't answer tonight, then we'll make sure they are done in writing on that document. Obviously, the meeting's going to be recorded, so we'll circulate a copy of that to you, and you can forward it on to any of your club colleagues or contacts. And the only other thing to note really is that there is a very short survey at the end of the meeting that's going to flash up on your screen. If you could just spare a couple of minutes to fill that out, it'd be really appreciated. It'd help us massively. So just in terms of letting us know what you thought about the meeting, suggesting any potential topics you'd like to see in future, things like that. So I think I've covered most things there. So what I'll do is I will ask our colleagues Stuart and Richard to come on, and Richard to pull up the slide deck for tonight. So I'll hand over. Obviously, yeah, any questions at all, just pop them in the chat at any time. But I will pass the floor over to you guys.
Evening all. Richard
Hey
should be
everybody.
sharing the slides shortly.
Yep.
I think you just need to go to slideshow, Richard.
Yeah, to get in here. Come on. There we go. It will catch up.
Right, are we at slide one, Richard?
Yeah, it's just that it takes a bit of time to load itself up with so many people on. So it's all ready to go there, Stuart.
Okay, thank you. Welcome all. Apologies, that's a slight technical hitch. So today we're doing the Welfare and Safeguarding Forum. I know a lot of you are interested in this. We've had a couple of questions that have come through on email already, and we've already had one question in the chat box. So evening, John. Good to see you on this. I'll pick up your question later on in that regard. Just a few introductions before we really get into the detail of the topic tonight. So the speakers tonight are myself, Stuart Sharp. I'm the head of delivery for Angling Trust. That is absolutely nothing to do with babies and midwifery. I look after various aspects of the delivery of our services, particularly delivery of services to members. So issues across my desk do include things like insurance, compliance, governance, HR. It's those sort of things, basically nothing relating to fish. And my colleague on the forum tonight is Richard Hadley. Many of you may have met Richard before. He's our lead safeguarding officer. He's also the manager of our coaching centre. So if you are level 1, level 2 coach, you would have crossed paths with Richard before. And just a couple of interesting mug shots there for you, just to show that we do actually fish. I believe they're actually from the, actually no, they're not from the same river because I changed my photo. So Richard's got a nice Warwickshire Raven carp there. and I've got a bag of small roach on a very windy day where I nearly lost my AT hat into a particular lake I was fishing. So that's us. Let's move on to the third slide, please, Richard. So just a brief outline of this forum, why we gathered here today, what are we going to cover? This is really just to inform you of why we're asking clubs to appoint a welfare officer. And I'd emphasize the word there of asking. We're not telling you, we're just asking you to do that. We're also going to go through some background information and some best practice around safeguarding as well. We're going to explain how this links with your inclusive membership insurance, because there's been a couple of questions about that already. Absolutely valid points. So we're going to try and explain that for you as well. We're going to answer any questions you may have. Like I say, they've got the Q&A chat box. And also Richard's going to touch on a training offer as well towards the end of the session. So they're our aims for the next hour or so. Next slide, please, Richard. Technology is running slightly slow. So reasons to consider welfare and safeguarding. So I can sort of roll this into sort of three different areas for you, really. First up, and the bottom line for me is it's good practice, and it particularly protects you as club officials, because I presume most of you on this call tonight are, club secretaries, treasurers, chairs, bailiffs, etc. May not be exclusively, but a lot of you will be club officials. So it protects you as club officials. It also protects your members as well. And when you think about it, a lot of our clubs, have members ranging from the very young. You may have, children in your club who fish alone. They may fish with their parents or grandparents. You may have junior fishing days, such, for non-members, to come along and have a go, catch their first roach, their gudgeon, carp, whatever it will be, and try to, bring them into the sport, bring them into your club. So this is just good practice, really, of looking out for the welfare and safeguarding of children, but also adults who are at risk as well. So that could be individuals who maybe have some mental health issues, or they may have some learning difficulties. They may just go for a bad sticky patch of life, and they're not the person they were 6 months ago due to a health issue or something like that. So it's just having that broader awareness, really. Second point I've got on there is insurers. Insurers are looking for improved governance, which will lead to reduced risks. So that is one of the drivers here. And we've had some quite detailed conversations through our insurance broker, Howden, from our insurers about what they're looking for from us and from the clubs. And it's from both, really. They're looking for AT to set a high benchmark for what we do in our events, running competitions, running England teams, etc., but also what our member clubs and member fisheries are also doing. You could be cynical and say, why are they looking to do that? Ultimately, they don't want to pay out on claims. None of them do, whether they're insuring you for risks relating to abuse or whether they're insuring you for driving your car around. If they can reduce the risks, there's less likely an opportunity for them to have to pay out, and that costs them money. So they're looking at improved governance, and this goes across not just safeguarding and welfare, but they're looking at it from things like health and safety perspectives as well. So this is nothing new to us, but their current hot topic is the safeguarding of members and members of the public. There's also this broader expectation on all clubs across all sports and pastimes in light of the White Review. Now, Richard will come on to more about the White Review in a moment, but the White Review followed the incidents that happened in British gymnastics, where young athletes were being abused in one way or another. And on the back of that review, that was picked up by the likes of Sport England, and that's really the lessons that learned. There's an expectation for all sports to pick that up, even though the circumstances don't at face value appear relevant to angling. We don't have people drifting lycra, on balance boards or things like that. But we do have clubs that have juniors or have adults at risk. So it's a different scenario, but the risks are still there, even if they're there to a much lesser extent. So They're the three sort of drivers that we have for the reasons to consider welfare and safeguarding. And if, like me, your children have played other sports, they've played cricket, rugby, football, swimming, whatever it is, when you've taken them to those venues, those pavilions, those clubhouses, etc., invariably you'll find a notice board somewhere which will have a few A4 sheets of paper on it, a couple of mug shots, and you'll think, oh, that's John, he's the club welfare officer. I hope I never have to speak to John, but if I do, I know he's there and I can see who he looks like, and there's his phone number, there's his email. Now, we appreciate angling clubs generally don't have pavilions or clubhouses. So we have to sort of get around this in a slightly different way. Maybe we include it in our club handbooks, whether they're the old-fashioned, in paper version you buy from the local tackle shop or direct from the club, or whether it's through something like Clubmate and your handbooks online. Okay. Should we move on to the next slide, please? I'm going to pass the baton now to Richard, who's going to take you through safeguarding, because he's more of an expert on this matter.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. And apologies if I sound a bit obscure, if my voice disappears a little bit. Only I've got what they call the 100-day cold, and so hey ho, another 75 days to go. So apologies if I do have to stop and drink some water. Yeah. So basically, the first question we need to ask really is what is safeguarding, and what does that really cover? That's both for young people, children, and adults. So to start off with, safeguarding is defined by the NSPCC is the action that is taken to promote the welfare of children and young people and to protect them from harm. A really, really simple and succinct sentence around safeguarding for young people. For adults, it is slightly different. Protecting adults' right to live in safety, free from abuse and neglect. And the interesting thing is that sort of since we've started to introduce this, there's a realization as well that those two aspects of safeguarding are actually slightly different in different countries. So a lot of the stuff we're doing tonight, you'll see tonight relates to safeguarding in England, but safeguarding in Wales, safeguarding in Scotland, and safeguarding in Northern Ireland are all slightly different. And just to give you a quick example of that, if you're in Wales and you smack a child, you can get a criminal record for it. In England, and you smack a child, as long as it doesn't leave a visible mark, then that's fine in English law. So there are subtleties and difference, and certainly some of you who may be online from Scotland, some of the safeguarding issues will be slightly different. And that also applies to DBS checks, which we might talk about later if we get any questions. Okay, and really what it's about people and organisations working together to prevent and stop abuse or neglect, whilst having regard for their views, wishes, feelings and beliefs. So it's slightly more than just having policies and procedures in place, but it's actually how we can support those people to fulfil their potential, if you like, and to ensure that we listen to what people have got to say. So just to look at the role of a welfare officer, it's a lot broader than just the safeguarding policies. But if we can sum it up by really looking at somebody who's a point of contact for members. And in the past, I've done courses called Time to Listen, which is a particular course for welfare officers. And sometimes what you find with clubs is that committees are running the clubs in disregard to what the members want. Where actually, if you think about it, should it be the members, the committee reflecting what members want, and the welfare officer is somebody that actually broker that deal between the two, and actually can reach out to people and sort of build that bridge between the two different aspects of being a club member. They need to be able to liaise with us at the Angling Trust, certainly on any safeguarding concerns, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit. And most important, about sharing information, club and communications to all members, because safeguarding relates to everybody, whether they're children, whether they're young people, or whether they're adults. And you don't need to be an adult at risk to have a particular condition. You know, we've all got different needs and wants as we get older. Capture details of any concerns and reports, and again, we'll mention that in a bit, and about the reasons why that happens, and really to report them back to us, or actually, if need be, how you can manage that process within the club. So, Angling Trust is going to not is probably not going to handle everything that's a safeguarding issue, particularly if it's something like poor practice. And we might back that back to you if it's not too serious and we think that you can deal with it as a club. For example, things like bullying on social media and bits and pieces, and how we can support you in that. Lead on the club safeguarding policies. So if you've had a look at the club resources page, which you probably have, you know, about those simple safeguarding policies we've put in place, and the procedures, and also the way that those are implemented. Are they having an impact? You know, does everybody know about them? And actually, are they making a difference? And Stuart related back there about people going to different clubs and different sports, and around safeguarding. And actually, what difference has that made to activities, if you like? Because when I was a kid, Mum used to kick me out in the morning. I'd go fishing all day, come back at tea time, have my dinner. But now a lot of sport is organised, and parents ferry kids backwards and forwards. And having a welfare officer and having strong policies and procedures in place actually is a big tick box for parents who are trying to get their young people into angling. So it really is important, and it can support the future development of your club, especially if people who are interested in joining can see that it's professionally run, and that there are things in place to look after their children. Again, that point that I made about listening to members, and listening to their views and actually having that input. And I think the thing about welfare officers sometimes, that if you think about the way clubs are structured, sometimes it's the tail wagging the dog, rather than the dog wagging the tail. And I think that getting the wagging in unison with the dog is one of the roles of the welfare officer, to make sure that, you know, you all work together and people are valued within that organisation. So I wanted to share some of the background into the, you know, the whys and wheres of where this has all come about. And it's nothing new, to be quite honest. The rights of the child have been about for over 100 years. There are 54 different rights of children, and safeguarding has always been on the agenda, but never as high profile as it is. And it's been driven by a document called the Working Together document of 2018. And basically what that document says is that at one time, different organisations such as social services, the police, national governing bodies, and safeguarding organisations all had different safeguarding policies, all had different operations. And what that happened was, because nobody talked to each other, there was an opportunity for abusers to slip through that net. And so what safeguarding legislation run by the government now is trying to close all those loopholes, and try and if they do manage to squeeze through that loophole, actually that it's reported. And you'll know from watching the telly, if you've watched things like Athlete A, or you've heard of a chap called Barry Burnell, you know that document now is working, and a lot of the historical stuff is coming out, and to try and prevent that in the future, that's what's happening in safeguarding. As an organisation, the Angling Trust is audited by the Child Protection in Sport unit. We've just completed that, and we're also audited now by the Ancraft Trust, which looks after adult safeguarding. And again, we are judged on our performance around different areas of that, and around our welfare framework, which looks at our culture within the organisation, our operations, and also the events that we run and manage. And then finally, the biggest thing that's had the most impact on all aspects of safeguarding, whether that's clubs, NGBs, it's filtered down to insurance, it's affected coaching courses, it's affected the way people are trained, etc., and levels of HR checking, is a thing called the White Review. And as Stuart mentioned, that was a a report into historical abuse within British gymnastics, where practices within clubs, particularly from coaches, was never questioned by parents. So to give you an example, young kids as young as 5 were asked to put their feet up on blocks to make them more flexible, and then in the splits, and so coaches would then put the weight on them until they were crying to try and extend their flexibility, and that was seen as normal within gymnastics. So the white reviews come through. We've changed all our coaching courses to affect that, and also this is where the legislation from HISCOPS has come to try and cover some of that historical abuse. So a quick summary. There were 3 main findings. It said that most sports traditionally prioritise income and participation over welfare. Historical practices were accepted without question, and a lack of reporting protocols and procedures. And we need to promote the welfare of anglers in all areas of business, and we need to consider that not just in the welfare but in diversity, inclusion and safeguarding and HR. So what do you need to do? Obviously, if you've read you're on this call tonight, which is fantastic, and you've probably read some of the resources that we've produced for you. You do need to appoint a welfare officer, and again, if you think about that, it's quite a responsibility, and you need to pick somebody that's got the best interests of people at heart. Have a look at our policies. You don't have to adopt them, but they're really simple and easy to do. Introduce procedures for safe deployment of staff and volunteers, and that's the protocols around HR checking, and that includes DBS checks, and also voluntary declaration forms. Most importantly, share that information with members, and like Stuart's mentioned, there are loads of ways you can do that. Probably one of the best ways, if you've got Clubmate, is to use that, because you can upload the stuff onto there, and then people can tick to say that they've approved it. If you're taking any sort of incident reports, so if you've got concerns, how you record those and how you then pass them on to other people. And then going forward, what we'd like to do is get a list of all the welfare officers, so that we can have easy contact with them, update them around what new protocols are, what new safeguarding things are, etc., etc. So that's a brief summary of what to do. It can be in more depth, and if you're going to do some of the training that we're going to provide for you in the future, then we'll expand on those roles. And then really what I wanted to do was to identify why we're looking at these positions within organisations and why it's so important. And I think a really simple understanding of how abuse works will give you a reason and the areas where these things are focused at. So this is called the 4 conditions model by a chap called Finkelhorn, which is perhaps very important. But first of all, it's about motivation. So within an abuser, there is that motivation to go out and commit abuse, whether that's emotional, physical, sexual, or neglect people. If they manage to climb over that wall because they've got that inside them, then the next thing are internal inhibitors. So internal inhibitors are how they justify their actions. So something like, when I was a child, my parents used to smack me and it never did me any harm. So that might lead to somebody becoming a physical abuser. And then we start to talk about external inhibitors, and this is where you as welfare or your welfare officers start to come in. So external inhibitors are things about where we start to put things in place, like our policies, our procedures, training, HR checks and stuff, because abusers traditionally try and push the envelopes around those areas to see what they can get away with. And the stronger those policies are, the stronger the checks are, and the stronger the organisation is enforcing that, then obviously the opportunities for an abuser to operate is reduced greatly. And then finally, if they manage to find a loophole in what safeguarding policies and procedures you put in place, and they do get to abuse somebody, it's actually providing that release, if you like, for how people can report those incidences, and how, as an organisation, you can actually contact us or work through and save that person coming from any further harm. Okay, so that's a brief, quick run through it. I'm going to pass over to Stuart for the next slide.
Thank you, Richard. Right at this stage, just going to look at some of the tools that we've tried to pull together for you, because we know this is fairly onerous for a number of clubs. I've been both a club treasurer and a club secretary for different clubs. I appreciate that all the officials round the table. Can we go back a slide, please, Richard? Thank you.
Yeah.
We appreciate that all the officials sitting on committees on clubs up and down the land, are volunteers. There's a handful of clubs that have got employees, but the vast majority of the clubs that are member clubs of AT are run and organised by volunteers. And you guys and girls have day jobs, you've got families, you've got businesses. Some of you may have retired, but even so, this is a voluntary activity you're undertaking. So what we've tried to do is make this as easy as possible for you. So rather than just saying you must go and do this, you should do that, working with Richard, working with our governance manager, taking advice off the likes of Sport England and the CPSU, we've pulled together a sort of suite of documents to really help you. So on our website, and that's the hyperlink on that slide, you'll find a club resources page, and there's some documents on there to support you. There's guidance actually on the page to walk you through the process of what you need to do, etc. Picking up from Richard's points, but there is a safeguarding policy for children. There's a safeguarding policy in regards to adults at risk. If you want to just download those and top and tail them with your club name and approve them at one of your club meetings and sign it at the bottom, then that's absolutely fine. If you want to incorporate it into a policy you already got, or you want to change the wording slightly, or you want to write your own from fresh, again, absolutely fine. We've just pulled these policies together just to assist you and give you a steer. So feel free to use them, to crib them. Okay. You'll also find on that page an incident reporting form. So if an incident does happen, and none of us want these to happen, but they do happen from time to time, there's an incident reporting form. Again, you could create your own, policy, your own form, your own process, but there's a form there for you to use if you wish to use it. So, no point reinventing the wheel unless you particularly want to. Use that form, top and tail it, and in the unlikely or unfortunate event an incident occurs, please feel free to use that form within your club environment and also reporting back to us as well. There's also guidance on responding and reporting process, because the role of the club welfare officer, when an incident happens, you will be busy, there will be questions to be asked, but there's a limitation of what any of us can expect your club welfare officer to do. And a lot of it is about just collating some local information, and then you get on the phone to Richard, or if somebody's particularly at risk, you get on the phone to the police. So having that sort of guidance there, the process of what to do, what to do if somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, on my lake, there's a strange man behind the trees and he abused me," or whatever. How do you respond to that child? How do you respond to that that member of your club? What do you need to do? What do you not do? That's just as important, and that guidance document will take you through that, and it's there for you to refer to at any time. There's guidance on the volunteer check-in process, and I think at least one of you's asked a question about that, which we'll come to in the Q&A process as well. And also there's some guidance on the disclosure and barring scheme, because again, some questions have been asked there of when do we need to get our people checked, what is regulated activity, how many points of contact do we need with the individual? You know, so those questions, and all of that is detailed in these tools, in these guides. So they're all in one place for you to use at any time. So please, you know, just feel free to sort of bookmark that on your browser, and come back to it at any point in time. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Richard? Right. Again, a couple of you have asked the question, well, why if we don't do this? You know, what's the implications for us as a club? You know, is our insurance invalidated or something like that? And I'd say absolutely not. So, Richard, I don't know why all the points haven't come up, but if maybe there's some sort of odd transition on this one, just to allay any fears here. You know, we're talking about today are really recommendations. This is what we're saying you should do. This is best practice. In an ideal world, you know, you'll find a volunteer within your club to pick up the welfare officer role, and you'll be able to take this forward, you know, within the club environment. But your club may struggle to find a person to do that. Your club may decide not to do that. Your club may have some really good, strong reasons not to do that. You know, you may have a club that's only 12 members. It may effectively be a syndicate. You have no children. You know, you've got 10, 12 adults, you know, all of, you know, a stable mind. And, you know, as far as you're aware, everyone's got really, you know, good health, no underlying conditions, etc. So the ask could be slightly onerous in that situation. So whilst we say it's best practice to have the welfare officer and to adopt the safeguarding policies, and we would recommend all clubs do that, if your club has good reason not to do that, that's absolutely fine. Just make a decision, you know, at a club committee meeting, and just record your decision and your reasoning. And that's quite important, actually, recording your decision, because, you know, if an incident does occur, and it doesn't matter whether it's abuse or whether it was a health and safety issue, the very first thing an insurer is going to ask you is, you know, let's look at your policies. Let's have a look at the procedures you've got in place. You know, we want to talk to your club welfare officer. And if you say, well, we haven't got one, we haven't adopted any policies, the next question will be, well, why? And if you've got really good reasoning and you've recorded that in your club minutes, and you've got a folder somewhere electronically or in hard copy, wherever you store it, and you've got your reasonings, the insurers just look at that and go, okay, well, you know, is it a reasoning they're happy with, they're not happy with? Now, like I say, if an incident occurs, the insurers will consider each case on its own merits, just as they do now in health and safety, you know, property damage, whatever it would be. So each case is considered on its own merit. We certainly are not in a position to give advice on particular cases. We're not the insurance intermediary. But they'll consider the case on its own merit. They may decline claims where best practice has not been followed. Now, how they define that will be down to them. You know, it may simply be, well, there's no club welfare officer in place. This club had 1,000 members, it had 100 children, it ran all these events, etc., etc. And they may say this isn't best practice. Equally, they may decline a claim in a much smaller club, and you may have a club welfare officer, but maybe the club welfare officer, you know, didn't follow his or her process. Now, hopefully, by having these calls, having these processes, having these policies, these templates, you know, we can avoid that happening. So, in the unfortunate incident, you know, something occurs, claim is submitted. Hopefully, the claim will be paid out, because ultimately, that's what you pay your insurance for. It's what we all pay our insurance for. And you know, the victim will be paid out, the club are indemnified, etc., etc. So, like I say, it's a recommendation. If you can follow the guidance, if you can adopt the policy, appoint the welfare officer, it makes life for all of you a lot easier in the event the claim happens. But if you've got very good reason not to do it, then that's fine. Just record your reasoning. So I think we're now going into Q&A session. So next slide, Richard. Yes, it is. Just before we go into questions, we put a couple of email addresses on screen, which you may want to just jot down. So if you've got any questions at any time about sort of welfare and safety, welfare and safeguarding, just email us at welfareandsafety@anglintrust.net. That account's monitored by a number of us. And if you do end up with any reports of, you know, any incidents of safeguarding, report them through to us at safeguarding@anglintrust.net, or phone Richard, phone myself, you know, just report it into us, as quickly as you can in the event there is an incident. Like I say, if the incident is that serious, you may need to phone the police. Hopefully that will never happen, but just you have to bear that in mind. Right, Alex, how do you want to run the questions?
Right. Well, thank you very much both for that. I think what I'll do is, so we had three questions in advance, which we can take first, and then we can get stuck straight into the questions that have come in tonight. Thank you for typing answers to a few of them already, Stuart. I can see there's been a couple that have already come through, but we'll just kick off with those ones that came in via email first. So. First two were from John Sire, who is with us tonight. Evening, John. So John says, my question is, if we do not take part or organise any regulated activities, does that exempt us from having to appoint a club welfare officer? Is the first one. So I'll pass back over to you.
Well, if I come in on that one quickly, Alex, think I've just touched on that one to a degree. If like I say, if it's a small club and there isn't any activity with children or with adults at risk, then the club can make its own decision whether to appoint a safeguarding officer or adopt the safeguarding rules. What I wouldn't say, John, is it's not about being exempted. So, it's still it's a decision for you. It's still a best practice thing. We would certainly recommend that you do it. But if you feel that you don't have these activities, you don't have these risks, then your club's well within its rights to make its own decision and to record that. So that's how I'd leave it with yourselves. I wouldn't say it's an exemption or at all, or you've got a pass to have insurance or anything. We've had these sort of questions from other people in the past, and that's not the way the insurer works. Okay.
Thank you, Stuart. So John's second question was, as far as vulnerable adults are concerned, I don't know that we have any on our membership and how we might go about identifying any. Surely we cannot be expected to police the activities of individual members with members of the public they might encounter on our fisheries.
Yeah, I'll retake this one, Alex, if that's okay with you, Stuart.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, and I agree with you. You don't know how vulnerable some adults are or aren't. There is a definitive list, actually, of conditions that relate to adults at risk, and that includes things like asthma, epilepsy, even dyslexia, disability, or it can actually be anything that makes that person particularly vulnerable. So, but the important thing to remember is this is not about policing that. It's about creating opportunities and supporting the welfare of those young people. So we're not asking clubs to police every single person that goes fishing or provide people to sit on a platform when anybody goes fishing. This is about having policies and procedures about how you understand and take those wishes of those people into account. So if somebody comes to you and says that they've got a disability, how are you going to make sure that you've got safe platforms for them to fish on? It doesn't mean that you have to be physically there in person to watch that person do that activity. That's not what it's about.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. I hope that answers your questions, John. So moving on to the next question that was in via email. This one's from Terry Henderson, who I believe is with us tonight. Evening, Terry. So Terry says, many years ago, I was the child protection officer for the South Staffs branch of the Pony Club, a role which I had for a number of years. A requirement for this position was that I was myself CRB checked. In addition to attending talks, meetings specifically aimed at child protection issues, I had to ensure all instructors had undergone CRB checks, etc. In total, around 20 instructors for the various disciplines. Under your current guidance document, I would not meet the threshold for DBS check, and this was confirmed by one of your colleagues in a recent email inquiry I raised. I understand the need to keep things simple, reduce paperwork burden on clubs, and to encourage and not discourage helpers, but I am struggling to accept that the very person who is expected to coordinate the club's activities and in effect monitor/police the guidelines is not required to be DBS checked. On what might consider a more positive note, I found the support documentation to be very helpful. So thank you, Terry, and over to you guys.
Do you want me to take that, Stuart, or?
Yeah, please, Richard. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, So the regards the DBS checking around pony clubs and stuff like that is all down to the way that the organisation that you work for affiliates its members. Currently, we don't have that process in place, so the requests around this come from the insurance company, not from the angling trust. And to do with DBS checks, it is all about contact and contacting a regulated activity. It's not about managing paperwork and stuff like that. It's around actual working with young people and having those opportunities to do harm, if you like. And I use that in the widest sense of the word. The thing is, as a club, okay, if you want to introduce that as part of your policies and procedures, then you are perfectly able to do that. And as the safeguarding officer, I would say that is good practice. And that the more clubs that do that, obviously you're reducing that risk and increasing your professionalism, if you like, in dealing with safeguarding issues. So there is a sort of difference, like I say. If down the line we Angling Trust wants to look at affiliation and look at the way that clubs govern themselves and to extend our influence, if you like, to keep children safe, which is one of our pledges, if you like, then that would be something we would probably look at. But it's not actually necessary because this is to do with the insurance company, not to do with Angling Trust.
Thank you very much, Richard. Okay. Right, so we'll move on to the questions that have come through on the chat tonight. As I say, if anybody does have any, please just pop them in now. So first one in from John Burns. Evening, John. So John says, juvenile membership. We seek to encourage juvenile participation in our sport, and in this regard, we do not have specific juvenile membership, but allow juveniles, stroke young people, stroke children under the age of 16 to fish at no cost at our fisheries when they are accompanied and under the close supervision of a current adult member. We would normally expect parents or guardians and grandparents to be that adult member and be over the age of 18 years, but we set no conditions, pre-registration or personal identity stroke relationship disclosure requirements on this concession. Question: does this present a safeguarding liability? Do we need to implement pre-registration or declaration conditions on this concession to validate the child-adult relationship arrangement? And that's from John Burns at Blackford's Progressive Angling Society. Great question, John. Stuart, I can see your hand is up already.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Does this present a safeguarding liability, John? That's less of an issue for me on this one. I think the majority of clubs that have juniors fishing, they're going to be fishing with their their parent, guardian, or their grandparent, and in the vast majority of those relationships, is there a safeguarding risk? No. That's not to say there won't be, because I'm sure that there are safeguarding risks in certain instances between parents and children. We hear them reported in the news, unfortunately. So the situation you have there, I'd say, it doesn't add to any underlying safeguarding liability there at all. I think it's great that your club allows the juniors to fish and that they are fishing with a parent, guardian, grandparent. What I would say, and it's a slight bit left field on this one, is I would suggest you, as a club, you consider making the juniors a member, even if you make them members at a zero cost. The reason I mentioned that is actually there's elements of the insurance package that all the clubs get that will only play out to members. So for instance, there's a personal accident element of it. So if somebody falls over on your fishery, breaks an ankle on a platform or something like that, or over a root of a tree, they could claim under personal accident. Now, they can only claim if they're a member of the club. Now, if your junior isn't a member of the club and is effectively a guest at the club, then there's a likelihood the insurer could say, well, little Johnny wasn't a member on that day. He unfortunately broke his ankle, even though he was there with his granddad. So I would just suggest it might be worth thinking about making those juniors or create a system whereby those juniors can apply for membership, whether you do it free of cost or you do it for £1 or £5 or, whatever it is. Obviously, we want to encourage the kids in. We don't want to all of a sudden charge them £50 a year. But Just something to take away and think about, I think, there, John.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stuart. Uh, right, so moving on. One from Andy Johnson. Um, so Andy says, how do we know if we have adults at risk? It's not something we ask. Should this be something we ask as members renew their membership each year? How do you have any recommendations about how to approach this? I'm not sure if that's something we touched on before, unless I've read another question that's along a similar vein.
No, just to come in on there, Alex. Really, you probably won't know. And some of the conditions are medical conditions, so they are confidential, and adults are not obliged to share that with you. But then again, if you've got a strong policy around adult safeguarding, and they do, there is some issues that they feel that they can raise, that they've got somebody to talk to about stuff, then obviously you've done your job and fulfilled your obligations as a caring club, if you like, and as a welfare club, and provide that. That's why the role of this welfare officer is important. It's that conduit really to talk to clubs and provide a single point of contact for people who might be uncomfortable talking about their condition. So yeah, that's it's again, it's not about policing this. It's about creating opportunities and being supportive, and putting your members' welfare first above income and
Yeah.
how many people are in your club, if you like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's actually a question that kind of follows on quite nicely from that. So this one's from Roger Till. So Roger says, is it best practice to keep a discreet or open list of children and/or vulnerable adults? Can this be seen as intrusive? Individuals can claim that their private details are their business. And Roger's follow-up question was, we let under 10s fish on their parents' permit without being named on the permit, assume they might miss out on the insurance cover, which I think you referred to before, Stuart, so that would be a yes.
Yeah. Just to answer Roger's point there, again, I would just recommend, you might as well just get those children in on some sort of junior free membership, because then they're just absolutely covered on the insurance. In terms of keeping a list, there'd just be a list of within your membership database. Then they would just be as your junior members. I wouldn't separately keep a list necessarily. Like I say, of people who are at risk. You just have your adults. You may have your senior OAP members. Depends how your club's structured. And you'll have your children. And within that groups, you'll know that you've got different risk factors. You're not going to allow your children to fish on their own, particularly if you've got certain stretches of river. So again, we got all these different contexts coming into this. Does your club just have a relatively shallow commercial pool with flat paths, nice platforms, etc., or are you renting a part of the River Wye or the Severn or something? So different clubs will bring different rules into play for their members there.
No, thanks, Stuart. And just another one from Rob, actually. If they were named on the adult's permit, would that get them covered by the insurance? Or would they have to be their own individual member?
It's a really good question, Rob. And like I say, we can't speak on behalf of the insurer. That's one thing I would emphasize there. But I would be happy if that was me running a club to argue the case with the insurer. If that piece of paper said, that's a family ticket, for instance, and it's for John Smith and Joe Smith, so I think, if it said, adult and child season ticket or family season ticket, I don't see how an insurer could deny that they're a member. So, but that's simply my personal opinion on that one. With a lot of these things with insurers, we won't ever have a definitive answer until it's tested, and unfortunately it only gets tested when a claim happens.
No, thanks, Stuart. Right, so moving on, back to another question from John. So John says, volunteering checking, reference the AT flow chart. You ask in your flow chart, have you obtained independently verified references from previous employers, stroke clubs, conducted interviews, or used publicly available sources to determine if the person is suitable? Question: what would qualify a person as being suitable? The SVG Act 2006 discusses barred persons. Does or would the completion of the AT self-declaration form satisfy this suitability requirement? Do we need to ask volunteers if they are barred under the terms of the SVG Act 2006?
Yeah, I know what John's talking about on this. Yeah, the funny enough, although there's on a DBS check, without going into too much detail, convictions do have a certain spent life. And if you do an enhanced check, they'll still appear on there, but you can't take them into consideration. That's why the insurance companies are asking for some sort of reference, if you like, live reference from another organisation, because if you look at the model of abuse, then abusers tend to spend 6 months at one club, 6 months at the next one, 6 months at the next one, just purely to hide their actions, and that's what the references are used for. The voluntary declaration form is actually quite a strong document, because it not only asks if you've got current convictions or anything in place, but it also asks the question whether you're being investigated for anything. And obviously, if you've done that due diligence as a club, and the person may have lied on that, then the responsibility is with that person that's lied on it, not with you as a club, because you've taken as many steps as you possibly can, and the insurance company again would look at that and see that you've been diligent in what you do. And again, the only thing with that is how often you review that form, because again, one week they might not be under investigation, and then the following week they might be under investigation. So it's good practice to put in a renewal date for that. So I'm suggesting yearly. With the DBS currently we do 3 yearly, but yearly is probably good practice just to make sure everything's up to date and as tight as possible, if you like.
Fantastic, thank you, Richard. Right, so one in from Michael Pattinson. So Michael says, if we have a policy adapted from AT, is there someone who could give it a review for us?
Yeah, I mean, if you use the welfare and safety email and you want to pop it in there and review it, like I say, that the policy that we provided for you is A4. If you haven't seen it, it's quite broad, and it's quite covering everything without going into too much detail. But if you want to use a more detailed version, or you want to put extra stuff in it, yeah, I'm happy to look at that and review that for you, just to make sure that it's watertight.
Yeah, super stuff. And for anyone that doesn't have that email, then we can obviously include that in the notes afterwards. So thank you, Richard. Next one is from Kevin Barry. So Kevin says, questions related to the reporting form. 1, what is the purpose of sending this form to the AT if we have already submitted this to the police / LADO? 2, what is meant by the sanctions that AT might apply after the CMT have reviewed the case? 3, what is the independent safeguarding authority referred to at the end of the form?
Okay, so with an incident report form, obviously what we're trying to do is the 4 R's, so recognise, respond, report and record. That incident report form really is a triage form. So if you've got an incident that happens and you want to report it, if you send it through to us, we will triage it for you. So if we think it's something the club will deal with, that's fine. We'll send that back to you. If it's something that's a little bit more involved, then we will set up a case management group to investigate it. Because even as a welfare officer, your job is not to investigate what's going on. That's our job, really. And again, if it's like social services, or we need to involve the ladder, or it's because it's a position of trust, or the police, then we will handle that for you. And the other agency it refers to is that we're a member of the Sport England and Sports Resolutions case management programme, where we get access to high profile like barristers and references and support really around difficult cases. So that might be stuff like sexual abuse, predatory paedophiles operating within organisations and stuff, which is not something you want to be dealing with at club level. We would deal with you. We would deal with that for you through those channels.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Richard. Right, so next one in from Paul Harding. Evening, Paul. Hope you're well. Paul says, "What is time to listen, and how important is it from a welfare officer standpoint?"
Okay, that's a great question, because it segues into something else that we're putting forward for you as well. So, time to listen traditionally was a course written by the Child Protection Support Unit, which was specifically for the training of welfare officers. They then passed it over to UK Coaching, and various people have got licenses to deliver that, including ourselves, and also listed on there is another company called Support Structures, and that is a 3-hour online course, which at the end of it you get a certificate to say you've attended it, and it costs around between, I think it's £35 and £45. But what we intend to do is introduce some of our own bespoke training and contextual training that really looks at safeguarding and really the role of this welfare officer within angling clubs and fisheries and federations. And we're going to offer that at a much discounted rate, using existing coach education workforce to deliver it online. It'll probably be around about a 2-hour course, with between 10 and 20 people on it. So there's plenty of interaction, and clubs can share their experiences and their bits and pieces. And I dare say Stuart and will be announcing when that's going to start. It will be fairly soon. In fact, the majority of it is already included in our new level 2 course around leading safe events. So that's going to be available for you. It'll be almost at cost price. We just need to cover our costs of Zoom licenses and stuff like that, and tutor costs, and it will be a really contextual course for angling clubs, not just in a general one like Time to Listen was. So if you can hang on for a few weeks, it'll be available shortly. You'll probably book it through Eventbrite, and we will again certify that and keep a record of the people that have done it. So if the insurance company ever asks about your level of training, which they haven't actually specified, then you'll be able to say that, yeah, we've done this, we've done some proper training and we understand the role better.
Super stuff. Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Right, moving back on to another question from John. So John says, "Regulated or controlled activity, Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act 2006. Both of these groups reference frequently or on 3 or more days in a 30-day period. Question: does an unpredictable and indeterminate contact with a child or vulnerable adult by a bailiff to check a person or child's membership require us, under the frequency of the contact reference above, to implement safeguarding procedures in either of these groups?"
The short answer is no. There's like I say, there's a difference between a DBS check, which has a threshold, which is actually a legal status, which is that 3 times a month in a regulated activity such as coaching, let's say. A bailiff contacting somebody on the side of the bank, then if you're employed, if you deployed somebody as a bailiff, then the voluntary declaration form is a far better tool to check that person and taking a reference than that. So it's like if you're walking down the street and you go to Tesco, you're not going to confront a child and have to be DBS checked to talk to them or anything like that. It's common sense, I think, and it has to be proportional to what you're doing.
Sure, that's brilliant. Thanks, Richard.
Okay.
Right, so moving on. This is quite a nice question to move on to. This one's from Stephanie. Evening, Stephanie. So Stephanie asks, who in the club would need DBS checks? Is it just the appointed officer or the committee members and bailiffs?
Again, that's down to the club. Like I say, it's not a condition of being a welfare officer that you have to have a DBS check. It's just we're saying that that's good practice to do that. because you might be sat at home just handling information and never coming across young people or dealing with young people other than looking at policies or procedures and stuff like that. But like I say, it's good practice. It's good practice to do that DBS checking.
Yes.
And
So
like I say, you can cover most things with that voluntary declaration form. And I mean, I, I was talking to Clubmate today. You could do that through Clubmate if you use that particular platform to provide those forms and collate that information if you wanted to as well, which means you haven't even got to hold the paperwork. You can keep it online.
no, that's brilliant. And
Okay.
on a similar vein from Chris, so Chris says we don't deploy volunteers on coaching activities other than with scout groups who bring their own people. On this basis, is any checking required? So I guess that kind of answers it nicely, doesn't it?
If you look at the working together document, the wording implies that there is some joint responsibility there, and I would imagine that the scouting safeguarding protocols are strong. And as a club, if you are happy with those scouting organisations coming into your club or your fishery, then that's fine. But if you feel that you want to take some checks about them, then make sure that you do some checks, because historically you can't identify who or who may not be an abuser, and at the end of the day they're coming into your fishery, your club, or your waters, and you're taking somebody's word for it that there's nothing happening. But that's up to you. Again, this is set out by the insurance, not currently by the Angling Trust, because of that relationship of the way that affiliation works at the moment.
Thanks, Richard. And there's there's at least 2 or 3 questions along the sort of same lines. So one from Steve Howell. So Steve says, are DBS checks, which you already have from your employer, transferable to your angling club role, or does the angling club have to apply for them on your behalf? We've also got one from Graham Bugler. If you have a DBS check from another organisation, is it valid for other organisation, e.g. the angling club?
The short answer is, again, that's down to the club. Normally, if you don't know, there are 3 levels of DBS check. So there's basic is the first one. I can't remember the second one. The third one is enhanced. If you're a coach or it's going to be close contact with young people, we would probably look at having an enhanced check for people that are working with young people or vulnerable adults. If it's just volunteers coming in to say, I don't know, do some maintenance work or stuff like that, then the basic check would be okay. And if the only thing is that a DBS check is confidential. So if you ask a person who's got one from another organisation to show you their DBS check and they say no, then obviously they don't have to show it to you. But my question would be then, if they're not prepared to show it to you, what have they got to hide? And again, if you're uncertain about that, I would certainly back that up with some sort of reference or HR check, just to make sure that that they are who they say they are, and that there's no issues around that. Because a DBS is like an MOT; it's only as good as the day that it's printed, and you don't know what's happening outside of that.
No, absolutely. And just kind of leading on from that. So, a question from Clinton. Clinton says, surely you cannot ask someone if they've been investigated, innocent until proven guilty. It would definitely cloud someone's prospects if they would say that they had been investigated regarding children.
Yeah, the only thing is there is a difference between burden of proof between conviction and in safeguarding. So for conviction in criminal law, if you like, then the case has to be 99% proven. In safeguarding, you can accept 51%. So on the balance of probability, whether somebody has been involved. And what happens sometimes is that stuff's reported to the police. The police can't find enough evidence to go criminally with something, so they send back no further action. But as a safeguarding due diligence, we will then investigate that a little bit further, to see if there is any smoke without fire and stuff like that. And we would take 50%, 51% as a burden of proof rather than 99%. Because at the end of the day, as a club and as a person as I'm not prepared to put young people or vulnerable adults at risk.
No, of course.
You know, just willy nilly. So yeah, that's that point there.
Yeah. No, thanks, Richard. So moving on, one from Baz. This might be one you want to take, Stuart, but obviously, you know, either of you feel free to chime in. So Baz says, if a member or prospective member says they have a health issue or disability which could mean they are at risk on our fishery, could we or should we apply risk assessing, which could mean we exclude them or refuse membership as their condition is a risk to them or others and cannot be accommodated? How does this sit within EHRC protected status?
Yeah, that's a challenging situation you may find yourself in there, Baz. I think it's absolutely great if you're having these conversations with a prospective member. Ideally, you will be able to have some sort of adaptations. You know, let's assume, you know, somebody's come to you and says, you know, I need to be in a wheelchair, and you think, okay, I can get them to, you know, to the lake. We've got a disabled friendly platform, etc. You know, and the path is relatively level, etc. And those adaptations are there, absolutely fine. You can have them as a day or season ticket member. However, you know, if the nature of your fishery or the nature of their disability puts you in a position where you're thinking, right, okay, they could be at serious risks here. Yeah, you know, there needs to be a fairly frank but polite conversation with them. We have to be careful, though, that, you know, you could find yourself in a position where you're potentially discriminating against people. So it is a very, very fine line. So, you know, it's going to boil down to the detail. So probably want, if this is actually happening, Baz, for you, probably best to take that offline and come to us for some advice on that one, and we can think that one over about the specifics without discussing them publicly with others.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. So yeah, obviously,
So yeah, reach out to us on the welfare and safety email, Baz, on that one, please.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stuart. So Kevin has actually just come back, and just referring to the questions that he asked earlier. So he says, thanks for the helpful answer from Richard, which makes it clear that AT will handle serious allegations. But can you re-ask my second question, please? What is meant by the sanctions that AT might apply after the CMT have reviewed the case?
Okay, so what there is a tiered list of offences, if you like, ranging from poor practice right the way through to sexual abuse, serious sexual abuse and stuff like that. And there's 4 tiers, and within those 4 tiers there are sanctions that relate to that. So sanctions for something like poor practice might be an offer of retraining, open frank discussion, constructive conversation, etc., etc. Right through to something a bit more serious. So it might be temporary suspension, or working with somebody to support them as a mentor, or not working unsupervised, right through to dismissal from the club or from the organisation. For me personally, with coaches, it might be that they have their coach licence removed, so they can't coach any further. So it's a tiered thing around a set of four levels. That document will be produced and go onto our website, the safeguarding website, but it has to get board approval first, and we're just collating all the additional documents that we require for board approval before we can actually publish them. But that's the way that it works.
Brilliant. Thanks, Richard.
Can I just come in extra on that one, Alex? Do you mind?
Stuart, yeah.
I can't remember who asked the question, but yeah, it's a really good question, but it's a question with so much context, really, because, you know, Richard's absolutely right with the different tiers of sanctions, and it might be, you know, there might be decisions that yourselves as club committee members have to think about. You know, if an incident has happened, you know, you might want to think about, do we still want this person as a member of our club, or do we suspend their membership for a period of time, etc.? It's the same questions that taxes Richard and myself and others here. If something was to happen within an AT environment, so if something happened maybe with one of our licensed coaches, or something happened with one of our England teams, or something like that. So this issue, none of us want this to come up, but when it does come up, we've got to look at the context of where that's happened. So it isn't necessarily AT making a decision for you about your member in your club. It might be an issue that you have to take forward, and think about in your club to protect the rest of your members, subject to whatever the incident is and the conviction that's, been achieved against that person.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that, both. Right, so next one from Andy Smith. So Andy says, should we as clubs be concerned if youngsters turn up not dressed properly, i.e. some form of neglect as defined by the Children and Young Persons Act 1933?
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes.
Yes.
The only proviso with that is that certainly when I played sport, I'd never turn up in a tracksuit, and I'd always turn up in my shorts, whether it was, and even now I wear shorts when it's sleeting and hailing and snowing. So you have to use your discretion around that. But certainly if I had any inkling that there was neglect involved or that somebody wasn't looking, then obviously incident report form, we would advise on that, whether it's up to you. But for something like that, we would probably inform social services to look into that case. And just to give you a bit of background, they'd probably do what they call a Section 47. So they'd go and visit the people, they'd have a look at what's in the fridge and where that person's sleeping and stuff like that. So yeah, that's it's not, again, I just refer that it's not your responsibility to investigate it. But by the same token, if you do suspect something, then it's your duty to report that. And the best place to report it is up to us, for us to manage that to begin with.
Absolutely. Thanks, Richard. So another one from Clinton. So Clinton says, at what age would you consider a junior becomes an adult, and what age could they be allowed to fish unaccompanied? This is probably a question we've had before, and I don't know whether it's
no, it's
an easy one to
like
answer.
I say, I can answer that. In law, okay, a child is somebody who's under the age of 18. But our duty of care actually extends to somebody who's 25 if they're under social services care. So just be aware of that. The thing is, with consent, obviously, when you get to 16 or 70, you can give your own consent. Because if you think about it, and certainly for myself, I lived on my own when I was 17. I wasn't under any sort of control of my parents, if you like. So 16 to 17-year-olds, if they can consent to receiving stuff, that's fine. My only advice is that, and I know a lot of the questions I've been having is from clubs that make their juniors, if you like, adult members at 16, is that perhaps in their initial membership, then you get consent from the parents that they're going to allow them to fish alone. But like I say, it's a common sense approach to do that, and certainly at 16 and 17, then I would argue that they are able to give their own consent for stuff.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard.
Okay.
It's one from Mike. Mike Fisher, very aptly named. Mike says, would we be at risk of a civil claim against the club if someone brought a child along to a working party and they were injured? Stuart, perhaps one for you?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. That's a very definite yes, Mike. And it doesn't matter if they're a child or they're an adult, whether they're an adult at risk or not. Some of you may be aware of an incident regarding a club a few years back where, unfortunately at a working party, an individual was hit by part of a tree which had come down. The tree had been felled, and the individual, for whatever reason, was within range of that limb of that tree coming down, and they were struck in the head by it, and they were taken to hospital, and they died a few days later. And the club did face basically a criminal investigation and were fined. So it doesn't matter if that person, like I say, whether they're 5 years old, 12 years old, or 85 years old, the club is at risk of a civil claim, or even potentially of a criminal claim. in those instances. So working parties, you've got to apply a lot of common sense. Who would you really expect to be at a working party? Would you really expect a child to be there? Would you expect somebody maybe with a severe disability to be there? You'd expect people to be able to be competent, certainly to be competent in the tools they're using and the tasks they're undertaking. You're going to look at the context of the surroundings, the venue you've got, etc. And you're going to create, safety zones, if you're taking down trees or anything like that. And also you've got to think beyond your membership. If you're working on a stretch of a river somewhere, is there public footpath, and how you're going to manage that risk there as well? So it's the long answer. The short answer is yes.
Yep. Suspected. So, yeah, thank you, Stuart. This next one from Nathan. So Nathan asks, as a member of a small club that runs learn to fish sessions for young people using club members, is there any help with costs for DBS checks?
The short answer again is no. My advice to you, it depends on the threshold, doesn't it? If they're not doing activities 3 times a month, then they don't need to be DBS checked. They can use a voluntary declaration form. If you do want to DBS check, obviously it's the responsibility of the club to sort that out. The only time that isn't true is if they decide to become coaches, and as part of the coaching qualification and the course fees, then we include a DBS check in that for you. Cost for a DBS check is around about £18. If you use UCheck, which is the one that we use, I think it's £18 plus an administration fee of around about 20 quid. Other checkers are available, but like I say, that is why I don't want people panicking over DBS checks, that they need to DBS check everybody. And like I say, the stronger form is the voluntary form on volunteers, self-declaration, plus that HR check, which shows that you've done due diligence, rather than just getting an MOT certificate, every I and every T crotted on what you've done since you were doing things.
Yeah, no, that makes a great deal of sense. Thank you, Rich, and I hope that answers your question, Nathan.
And Alex, can I just add something else extra into Nathan's question there? Nathan, just thinking about the situation here with the club with these young people fishing sessions, obviously the risks would be lessened if the child's been brought along by the parent staying. So that's another way of approaching it. We've also got to think about the context of the water you're in. If you're fishing on a club pond and whoever's the lead on the day can see every poach, lowercase inverted commas, and child, there's less of a risk than maybe if they're on a different boundary on a river or something like that, or it's a venue where maybe there's more vegetation and people are hidden away in swims or something. So we've just got to think about those broader issues as well. But basically, if you've got the parents there with the child, straight away it reduces your risks. You haven't necessarily got to worry quite so much about the DBS, because mum or dad will be sitting there with little Johnny.
I'll expand on that a little bit as well, Stuart. Just be aware that actually this is a great position for your welfare officer. If you're running an event with parents and young children there, if your welfare officer's there to identify, because there are actually 2 sides to this. If you remember the slide that I showed, Finkelhorn slide, we're trying to prevent stuff by having parents there, but you never know whether it's the parents that might be causing trouble or might be abusing their children in some way, and you need to provide that route, if you like, for them to also talk to somebody if they want to report something, because that's the side of it as well. So a welfare officer that who's identified, even if they've got a jacket on, let's talk to the parents. And the other thing I always say, that if you're talking to parents, you don't know what those parents can offer your club. You might have an IT wizard in there. You might have somebody that's fantastic at admin, an accountant. We fail to engage with parents sometimes when they can actually be really, really supportive and an additional workforce for your club.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point, Rich. And actually, one of the later questions we had in from Uvoni is: would it be advisable to have the welfare officer in attendance for events where children, young people, or vulnerable adults taking part? So I think that's a resounding yes. Great bit of practice there.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that, because I should mention this about other sports. So if you go into a cricket club, you'll see a poster with somebody's name on it. It means absolutely nothing. If you actually got that welfare officer going around and talking to people, then it really brings it alive, and people feel more valued that you're taking that trouble to look after potential members, people that are members anyway. So yeah, sorry about that, but
It's all right. Right, so we're obviously due to finish for 8:30. We've got 7 questions left to work through, chaps. So we may be able to get everybody's answer. But as I say, if we do overrun, then we'll follow up in writing. So a few more. So one from Chris Burton. So Chris says, "Hi, we've added the line nature of disability, if any, on our membership renewal forms. Is this okay?"
Yeah, it's absolutely fine, that, Chris. People have just got to have the opportunity to, go down the prefer not to say route.
yeah, that's under data protection. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the other thing about people think about disability is that you've got to have a blue badge or something like that. If I fall over and break my leg, then I've got a disability, haven't I? Even though I haven't got a blue badge to park at the car park.
Yeah.
And as a club, I might need some support. If I can't get down a bank to get something, or how can I still be involved in angling? Yeah, speak to the welfare officer and they can try and sort something out for me.
Yeah, fantastic. So from Gary, and I think this is a very interesting question. It's one I'd certainly be open to, Stuart. But I'll put the ball in your court. Would it be worth asking the insurers to put together a forum?
A great question, Gary. I can certainly put it to our brokers. And that's something we've got to bear in mind is obviously we've got a really good relationship with Howden as our broker. They're our go-between. They work for us, not for the insurer, but they reach into the insurance market. So we've got various different insurers insuring elements of our policies. We're using Hiscox, Ortus, and I think there's one other as well this year who insure different elements of our risks. Would Howden be willing to come to one of these meetings? I would, without promising anything, I would say yes, they probably would be. The issue for them would be, what's the agenda, and so I think maybe a more broad spectrum insurance type forum might be worthwhile, because I'm sure people have questions about, the contents cover, of their lookups, their sheds on the fisheries, are their mowers protected, etc., etc. What happened to fish stock cover, all of those sort of questions. So I can certainly put it back to Amanda at Howden, and through Alex, come back to you all.
Yeah, 100%. That's a fantastic idea, Gary. So thank you for raising it, and we'll come back to you on that one. So next one's from Stephen. So Stephen says, on the typical policy documents that you have produced, I'm assuming that it is the club welfare officer who signs this off. We'll be grateful if you could just clarify this, please.
Yeah, on the safeguarding policy, obviously it's a committee decision. So whoever who's got the executive power to sign off on the committee, they would sign that document as being approved by the committee. So either the chair or the secretary, whoever's got that delegation of responsibility.
Yeah, super stuff. Thank you. So next one, another one from Rob. So Rob says, should that new 2-hour course just be for welfare officer or all ex-com members?
It's entirely up to who you want to send on it. We'll run as many courses as we want going forward. We're here to support you. That's part of your membership of AT. Like I say, this is driven by the insurance company. But for me, the safer I can make things for everybody that goes angling, the most important thing it is. And if you want to send Uncle Tom Cobley and all, we will facilitate that. At the end of the day, there is a small cost involved, which covers our costs. And I think knowledge is power, isn't it, in these situations? Because it's been clear from the feedback when this was introduced that not many people have a great deal of knowledge around safeguarding, and people tend to get frightened by it, where actually it's common sense. A lot of it's common sense, and adapting stuff that's already out there. So yeah, we anybody that wants that training, we'll offer it.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Richard. So Another one from John Burns at Stuart. I think this was something that John's referring to from the presentation earlier, but John says, Stuart, responsibility is a questionable word with volunteers, it implies contract relationship.
That's actually, Alex, that's actually in response to a question I answered
Ah,
direct,
apologies.
yeah, to John. Whether it's responsibility, whether it's lead, it was in regards to question John had about the title of the individual, the welfare officer. He raised a really interesting question of, does the person need to be a welfare officer? Could they be a safeguarding officer? Ultimately, I don't think the badge really has, is the important thing here. If your club decides to call the individual, your club safeguarding officer rather than your welfare officer, that's not the key or critical issue here. The issue is the club, putting good policies, good processes into place? Is it protecting your members, whether they're adults at risk or juniors? So you can call them what you like. And in my response to John, I did say, it's who has that responsibility within the club. Responsibility with a lowercase r, John, who's leading that, who's driving that forward on your committee, just like other people will drive forward, the maintenance on your waters or your health and safety, your finances, etc. So yeah, that's the way I'd look at it. Just who's leading that, and you can call them welfare officer, you can call them a safeguarding officer. Don't think the title's going to be too important. So
Brilliant, thanks, Stuart. Right, so on to the final few questions. So from Daniel, Daniel says, within schools, enhanced DBS lasts 3 years. We then have sign a declaration form annually to confirm that we have not been involved in any criminal activity and are not investigated. Would you consider this to be satisfactory instead of having DBS annually?
Yeah, I haven't mentioned DBS annually. I said the volunteer form like they sign at schools, to review that annually, just purely because I ask questions about investigations. Our policies and protocols around DBS is that we review every 3 years, in line with what schools do. And in fact, with our coach license scheme, we're probably at the forefront of most sports, in the way that we manage safeguarding. And I just wanted to relate just before we sort of sign off. Actually, in angling, we are particularly good at safeguarding particular areas, and the incidence of safeguarding issues within angling trust is really small compared to other sports. So the FA have got something like 600 current live cases. We've got 1 or 2. That doesn't mean to say they're any less serious, and one is a good thing. No cases is the ultimate scenario. But like I say, if we can get to none, that'll be even better. But we are strong in a lot of things that we do.
Yeah, 100%. Right, so just a couple more to go. So another one from Baz. So Baz says, if a child tells you something that is of concern, do you listen to the end and leave it there, then report, or can you ask clarifying questions? I understand we shouldn't investigate, but does establishing facts become investigation?
Okay, so if you've got a child that starts to disclose to you, you can't ask leading questions, and you will need to make a record of it. But we ask you to use a mnemonic called TED. So that's TED stands for tell me. So tell me about what's happened. Can you explain a little bit more about what's been going on, or can you describe to me what's been happening to you? And those are open questions. They're not leading at all. And then just to record that and write it down. Most importantly, sign it and date it, because if it is something serious, then and that gets taken to court, you as the first point of contact where that person's had the confidence to disclose to you, you will be grilled by the barristers to the nth degree. And the other thing I'll warn you is it will be the most uncomfortable, heart-wrenching thing that you've probably ever done in your life. So don't hold on to yourself. Report that information, send it straight on. And if you need to, get some support outside of that, because it will be horrendous for you if it's something very serious.
No, thank you for that, Richard. So I can barely believe I'm saying this as well. This leads us on to the final question of the night, just as we've hit 8:30,
Okay.
which is perfect. This is one from Stephanie. So Stephanie says, "Will you be providing a printable copy of this webinar and details of the course?" So what we'll be doing with regards to this webinar tonight, Stephanie, is we'll send round a recording of the presentation portion from Stuart and Richard, along with a written version of this Q&A session tonight. We can also circulate a flat copy of the slides as well if you guys are happy. I can just turn those into a PDF and send them
Yeah.
round. With regards to courses, I guess Richard, that's one for you.
Yeah, that I've just got to orientate the tutors. The course is written. As soon as it's been signed off and people are happy with it, then I'm happy to make that available. But my thoughts on that is attend the course. It's 2 hours out of your evening. There's a lot of discussion, and you'll find out that a lot of these issues and questions you're having concerns that are shared by a lot of other people as well. And talking those things through, there's nothing stronger than sharing that with other people's experiences to make you stronger and develop that sort of culture, if you like, around safeguarding. And I think that's really important. And one of the, if you don't learn anything else from the course, it's where you can go for help and how other people are coping with this situation as well. So I would recommend it, and I dare say that'll go out through Stuart or through how you can book that course is going forward. But I can't see it being that far away now from going live.
Yeah.
No, just to add on the back of that, Alex, yeah, we're looking at launching that very, very soon. And as Richard says, they'll be led by, experienced sort of coach educators. They'll be for smallish groups or 10 to 20 people. They'll be done online, done virtually. There will be a notional cost. And that's literally just to cover costs. So we're not making any money on these. It's literally just to cover our costs so we can run as many of these as we need. If we need to run 10, we need to run 100 of them, we'll do that. So just bear with us on the timeframes.
Brilliant. Right. Well, on that note, we will leave it there. So firstly, a huge thank you to Richard and Stuart for coming along tonight, taking time out of their evenings to come and talk to you. I've personally found that really, really useful, and I'm sure everybody sat at home has. And obviously, thank you to everybody that's come along as well. I appreciate we're all very busy, so it's great to see such a strong turnout on such an important topic tonight. Obviously, we will get the recording circulated as soon as possible. So this will go to all of you, plus the people who registered and didn't attend tonight. But feel free to forward it on as and how you please, along with the written Q&A notes. I should flag as well, we've got some more virtual forums coming up next week. So on Tuesday, we're joined by Paul Coulson, who is Director of Operations at the Institute of Fisheries Management, talking about creating habitat on stillwater fisheries. So really, really good opportunity if you're planning any work on your stillwaters in the near future. So that's probably going to focus on kind of resilience, hot weather, and I believe the Met Office are expecting a scorcher this year, so that'll be a really good one to attend. And we've also got a forum about what the Angling Trust does about participation in general. So if you've got any questions or concerns about what the governing body is trying to do to get more people into fishing, that'll be a really good event to attend. So obviously details on the website. Should also thank Mark in the background as well, who's been doing all the notes, because I often forget to thank him. So thank you, Mark. And yeah, if you've got any further questions, just feel free to drop me an email, and yeah, we'll hopefully see you all soon. So signing off for now. Bye everyone, and yeah, if you can complete the survey at the end as well, that'd be fantastic. So we'll see you all soon.
Thank you all.